battle royale.
It's a battle royale. Final Fantasy 16 is a battle royale. It is not an action game. It's not an RPG. This is a battle royale.
But larger scale armies, not people. But it's like forcing everyone in.
Oh my goodness!
It's a battle royale that the mother crystal is like playing and flipping the switches, and is like, ooh, here comes the blight.
Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
And my name's Kason.
We're back to discuss Final Fantasy 16.
Yeah.
We've gotten much further in the game since last time.
Yep.
I don't think we're going to be able to talk all the way up through what we've played through today.
No, I don't.
But I just want to let people know we have gotten past the, I'm going to even refrain from saying that, the Drake's Head mission in Sambrec. It kind of comes to a head there, everything. Yeah. I think even before you accept the mission, it says this is a turning point, like an important part of the story. If you go past this, there's no coming back. It's like one of those types of things. So we finished that whole thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're going to talk that far. I suspect we will go past the Ifrit icon battle, which is kind of the next one, and then maybe a little further than that, but that's probably it for today. Okay, so we left off with the last icon battle between Garuda and Ifrit. Benedicta is dead, and basically Clive is taken back to the hideout. And before we continue on with that, there's a big battle scene between the Empire of Sambrec and the Kingdom of Walode.
Yeah,
and
very interesting.
There's two more icons that fight in this battle.
Yeah, it's Bahamut and Odin. No, not Odin.
Yes.
Is it Odin? It is Odin.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the son, I get, what do you call the son of an emperor? Is it Prince still?
I guess.
I think they call him Prince.
Yeah,
but
Prince.
Anyways, the Prince of Sambrec, who is the dominant of Bahamut, and then the King of Walode, who is the dominant of Odin. So basically just starts out with Odin on the field already.
Yeah.
And then he decides to take his Bahamut form, and they fight back and forth.
It's so funny. It's so interesting how easily he switches back from Bahamut to his normal self. Like he's just like, oh, I got to do something, and he's just like flies up there and battles Odin for like a while, and then comes right back, and he's like plotting with his men. It's so interesting because the way we've seen dominance become dominance in this game up to this point is like it's a big deal, and it's not like that simple. But this guy seems to have very precise control over Bahamut.
Yeah, and seems to be less affected after the transition.
Yeah, he does. He's not coughing. He's not in pain. Yeah, it's like he's got a really tight relationship there. Whereas for maybe Sid or any of the others, it's like there's some tension between them and their dominant. There's them and their icon.
There's also the possibility that Sid's been awakened for a much longer time. There's that scene in Martha's Rest where he shows his arm, and part of his arm is already petrified.
It's turning whitish,
and he says something about the result of 1,000 thunderbolts or something like that.
Yeah.
So it could be that Sid is sort of in the he's much further along as we learn. The more you use ether, the more ether is sort of filtered through the body.
The more it uses you.
Yes.
Right,
exactly.
The more you use it, the more it uses you.
So it's possible that his name is Dion Lesage. He awakened. He's definitely a lot younger than Sid, so maybe awakened more recently. Yeah. It's not affecting his body as much yet. So maybe it's just. But he doesn't stay in that form for very long. It's like their spat is maybe a minute and a half tops,
and then he comes
and
right
then he
back.
He just zoop, and then goes and gets a drink in
it's
tent
crazy.
While they keep fighting.
Crazy, yeah.
Just takes a break for a second, and then oh my gosh, he basically learns that they're not going to be receiving reinforcements to the battlefield.
Yeah.
There's a problem back in the Empire. Oh, but is my father okay? Yeah, he's alive. That's all that matters. We don't need reinforcements. I'll take care of the enemies here, and then he goes back out.
He steps back out. It's almost like
cool.
like a boxer going to the corner of the ring, you know,
Yeah.
just as soon as the bell
After
rings,
the
he
round.
just walks back, sits down, you know, spits his water out and like talks to the coach who like massages his muscles for a minute and then just
Yeah.
gets right back up and he's ready to fight again.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it's a pretty cool scene. There's not really a lot to talk about there.
Yeah. Other than just like as soon as Benedicta is gone, now we need new characters. We
That's
need
true.
new, and so they immediately start introducing us to, okay, here's the next, or here's some other people. This is some other stuff that's going on. Here's the other people that you're going to have to worry about in the future.
And it's basically showing us that Willode and Sanbreck are in this sort of almost constant
Yeah.
battling back and forth for territory. Again, as the blight is spreading in both continents. Willode is in Ash, which is the eastern continent. And the entire eastern side of that continent is basically taken over by the orcs, and just the blight in general is just ravaging that side.
Right.
So it's like pushing them further to their west coast. And then so they got to go west into Storm if they're going to find more land, you know, habitable land.
Yeah.
And Sanbreck's doing the opposite. They're in the north, maybe
south,
like, and they're
right.
going south and east, trying to find fertile land. And they're both kind of just running head to head into each other at that point, where it's like this land right here is going to be the
It's
last.
like the key strategic point. Yeah.
And there's a whole nation right there in between the two
Yeah.
that are kind of caught up in this, the crystalline dominion or whatever, which we'll talk about next episode. But so anyway, the blight is sort of spreading from the outer portions of the land inwards, and so it's kind of pushing all of these factions further and further towards the center.
That's
between the
almost
two.
like what was that? The Hunger Games, but
Yep.
battle royale.
It's a battle royale.
Final
Final Fantasy 16 is a battle royale. It is not an action game. It's not an RPG.
It's on
This is a
larger
battle
scale,
royale.
but you know, larger scale armies, not people. But you know, it's like forcing everyone in.
Oh my goodness!
It's a battle
true.
royale that the mother crystal is like playing and flipping the switches, and is like, ooh, here comes the blight.
It's totally true, dude. Final Fantasy 16 is a freaking battle royale. Anyway, that scene's cool. And then the next one takes us back to Sid's hideaway again, and we've got Clive in the dungeon, the prison area.
That's right,
chained up.
because he can't really control himself, right?
No, they're all kind of like, whoa, what's going on? This guy is Ifrit. This is
Yeah.
crazy. They wouldn't know that. A second icon of fire. This is impossible. Why does this
Impossible.
exist?
You know what's crazy too? I think that they locked him up not just because he was out of control and they didn't know if he would turn again. I think they also locked him up for his own safety.
Yes.
Because the conversation they're having immediately when Clive wakes up is like basically Clive wants to
kill himself.
Yeah. And so Sid locking him up served two purposes. It kept him from just immediately, because impulsively that's all Clive wanted to do right away until Sid can talk to him for a little bit. He needed to kind of be bound for that to happen though.
Yeah. This is totally tangent, going off of our joke about this being a battle royale.
I know, I'm thinking of it too.
I just had the thought, because people are talking about the spin-offs and whatever.
Oh yeah.
Here's a mashup. Here's a genre mashup that we need. We need RTS mashed with
Battle
Royale. So it's literally like army.
That's this game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm talking about like raising armies, resources, all this
Yeah.
stuff, but like there's a shrinking
There's a blight.
field.
Yeah.
And you have to stay inside of that and continue harvesting resources and battling until there's only one army left.
That's great.
That would be a cool game.
Oh, man.
Somebody should make that.
What was that? What was that samurai?
I'm talking like Command and Conquer, or like
Yeah, something like that.
What's the other one you guys used to play?
StarCraft.
StarCraft.
Yeah,
type of
yeah.
game. But it's a battle royale field with a shrinking map, and you have to keep moving in and abandoning your past
You have to abandon your
forts
bases.
and
Yeah,
bases,
keep building new
and
bases.
Keep building new bases. That'd be freaking crazy.
That would be really cool. That's basically what's happening here.
That's what this game is. Anyway, what were you saying?
I can't remember.
I don't remember either. Yeah, well,
Not important.
Clive, they're chaining him up to protect him
To protect
from
him.
himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I killed Joshua, and when Sid comes in, he basically just starts screaming at him like, "It was me, I'm the one.
Yeah.
Kill me, end it. Kill me now."
And
Just go crazy.
Sid, I know, and Sid probably knew that this
Yeah.
would happen. And this is his line. I didn't know you had it in you. It's like, I can't believe he went there. That is so evil. Like, that was too far, man. That was too far. I love Sid, but man, that was too far.
That joke, what do they say? It's like too soon.
Too soon. Way too soon. Like, immediately. He's like, yeah, I didn't know I had it in me either, and it murdered my family. Jerk.
Yeah, it's a little too soon for that one, but it was funny.
It was funny.
Anyway, he sort of, knocks sense back into him.
Yeah, he's like, you still got to get revenge. Look, he's just using the revenge idea just to keep Clive going.
So he's like, that's that line we talked about last time. I figure I could take you if that's really what you want.
That's right.
But, first I felt I'd give you the benefit of my timeless wisdom, right? Like, listen, I've had Gav out looking for your dominant. So, let's go talk to him. Let's go figure out what he.
That guy's still out there. Joshua's killer is still out there.
Yeah, even if you're the one who killed him, this dude who showed up had something to do with this.
Right.
So let's find out the truth. It's a win-win situation for you.
Yep.
If this guy was responsible, you can kill him.
Yeah.
If he's not and you were responsible, you can kill yourself.
Then kill yourself then.
Then sweet. You took revenge either way. But Gav's been working hard for you. Right. And the least you can do is go listen to what he has to say. Because he's been out there risking his life to find this guy for you. So let's go meet him in the King's Fall and see what he has to say. So that's where you head next. And what you find out is there's a bunch of Imperials in the area, and Gav's in trouble. They're chasing him.
Right before we find that out, Clive is walking across a bridge. And he just stops and looks down over the edge of the bridge for
a
little too long, right? And the implication is he just wants to jump, right?
Yep. But
then he sees the Imperial soldiers, and then Gav is running, and he's like, "Oh shoot!" Now he's got purpose, right?
Yep.
Even after Sid's talk with him, he wasn't totally. He still has that in him. He still is thinking is any of this worth it?
Right.
But as soon as Gav needs him, and it's obvious, it's present, it's right then, he kind of is able to throw that away and go have some experience some meaning in his life again for a little bit.
Yeah. So, I mean, you kind of have a whole level here. You fight a bunch of enemies, and I think they have some Minotaur enemies that serve as mini-bosses. But at the end of that sequence, you finally catch up with... Oh, you fight a Dragoon, I think. Or if not a Dragoon, just a tough Imperial warrior.
Yeah, a really hard one.
I seem to remember it being a Dragoon, though. Anyways,
I can't remember.
You catch up with Gav. He's kind of walking towards the edge of a cliff that goes into a river. And he's kind of being pushed there by a bunch of guys. You fight him, he falls, but he catches the rock at the last second, and you pull him up.
Right at the last second.
Essentially what he reveals that he found out was, yes, this hooded man you're talking about is definitely a dominant of fire. No question about that. Yeah. And I also found out they're heading to your old stomping grounds in Rosaria. And he's like, and this confuses Clive because he's like, what are you talking about? Second dominant of fire? How could that be? Because my brother was the dominant Phoenix.
Right, and he's gone.
He's gone. I'm the dominant that I was chasing. So if he is a dominant of fire, what does that mean? So it creates kind of a new mystery.
It does.
Something to be solved there.
Although it is solved very quickly.
It's solved very quickly.
Very quickly afterwards. But it's interesting to think that it's been 13 years.
Yeah.
The Phoenix could have been reborn in someone else.
That is something.
And then it would be a 13-year-old kid.
I've wondered about. They haven't really explained this, and I haven't seen anything in the ATL yet.
Yeah, how long does it take?
When a dominant dies, how long is it before that icon shows up in a new person? Is it right away? Is it many years?
I would guess
it
takes maybe a little while.
Or what's the average, or what does it typically do? Right?
If it skipped Clive and went to Joshua, Clive is at least 3 years older than Joshua.
And it also skipped Clive's father. Right. But how long ago did Elwin's father die?
Good question.
Did he die before Joshua was born? I don't know.
If he died, I would assume he died before even Clive was born.
I would
because he died
think
early,
so too, because they were expecting Clive to be the next dominant.
Yeah, so he couldn't have been alive, but who knows? So you're right. But theoretically, let's just say if it happened immediately, then the Phoenix dominant could be 12 or 13 years old now,
at this
which
point.
Seemed to be, at least for Joshua, seems to be around the time when the powers awaken in a new wielder, a new dominant. Right. So that's just a possibility I want to throw out there. It's wrong, as we'll see in the next scene. But, Clive, in terms of what Clive could be thinking, maybe a new dominant is born, right? A second dominant of fire. It's possible. Anyways, I don't know what's up. I don't know. But it is revealed. This is Joshua.
Yes.
The hooded person we've been chasing is Joshua. And I don't know how that's possible at the moment.
It's so confusing because in the battle against Ifrit, the hooded person is Clive. He sees himself in the hood.
You do see both.
And so it's like, which hooded person?
I have an interpretation there. I've got stuff to say about it there.
Because I saw that where Clive takes off the hood and it's himself.
Yeah.
I am currently of the belief that the hooded person he saw at Phoenix Gate back at the beginning was himself.
Oh, that
not
gets rid of
Joshua time traveling. I don't think it's a time travel story. Is what I'm saying.
Right,
basically, that got ruled out when I saw that.
So that's so strange. So Clive sees this hooded person, and then Joshua becomes that same looking hooded person 13 years later. Very interesting, but.
Because there's something to do, but we can't talk about that yet because that's next episode with the whole what's revealed about the fallen civilization and all that stuff.
Interesting.
But anyway, I failed to say this last time. I'm kind of pissed at myself for doing that because I had talked about you before we recorded the episode about where I had guessed that Joshua was the hooded man. And it was in a scene that we forgot to talk about where the castle Kaer Norvent is sort of being burned and collapsing.
Oh, yeah, and we're following him.
Yeah, and there's a scene where he and his companion are leaving the castle where I went, that's Joshua.
He was using fire to burn everybody,
Yes, and it was like, okay, I'm pretty sure that's Joshua. And then, so when he took off the hood, I was like, yep, that was him. So, but it is crazy that it was revealed as soon as it was. This is not something I would have expected to come basically up into the part where we played up to. I would have expected that to be the moment where they revealed Joshua was the hooded guy.
But instead they show it here.
Yeah.
But then they don't do anything with it for a little while.
Yeah.
So they decided to reveal to us before it became revealed later on.
Yeah, to Clive or anyone else.
Also, he looks like Roxas from Organization 13.
Sure does.
And with that hood and everything, it's just, I don't know, I feel like there's something there.
Some Kingdom Hearts stuff going on. Maybe he'll be in the next Kingdom Hearts game. Okay, so when you get back to the hideaway, Jill has woken up. And Clive is really conflicted about going in there and talking to her. Obviously, he's happy she's fine. But like at the same time, he knows he killed Joshua. He doesn't.
And he doesn't want to talk about it.
Sees himself as a monster.
Yeah.
And he'd have to explain why her life has been destroyed and it was his fault.
Right.
And all this,
he killed all those people.
But, Sid sort of pushes him to it. So he goes in there. They have a really nice reunion between each other. She sort of explains what happened after, what happened at Phoenix Gate. She got captured, taken back. She was threatened, like we were talking about last time.
Yeah.
The other women, Rosarian women who were taken as captives, would be tortured, killed, whatever, if she didn't fight for them. Yeah. So she sort of felt coerced into fighting for them. And and there's even a great scene a little bit later where her and, we'll wait to get to that point, but she basically, like I said last time, she was hoping that fight against the assassins who came after her was going to be the end.
Going to kill her.
Yeah, she was ready for this to be over. She just didn't want to continue anymore. So the fact that Clive is alive, it really is you. This is a really great thing. However, she says something about the way dominants are treated or whatever, and he says in response to that, they treat us, including himself, this way. And then she's like, "Whoa, wait, what are you talking about? Us?"
Well, because she hasn't.
You're a dominant. What do you mean? And then that's when he has to explain. I was the one who I awakened as a fire dominant on that night. I killed Joshua. I, did all of this.
She takes that pretty well.
She takes it really well.
She's just like, oh, well, I know you didn't do it on purpose. I wanted him to at least say, but I didn't do it on purpose. He never even said that. He didn't even
say that.
She just knew that he meant it.
Yeah,
that way.
She basically just says, I know you wouldn't have done that. Like, I know you. And, sure. I mean, she was kind of like his sister. She grew up with them.
Yes.
But her approach to this is basically, let's go back to Phoenix Gate.
Where it all began.
This dominant of fire you're pursuing, this hooded man, was on his way to Rosaria anyways. Let's go there. Let's find answers. And if it so happens that you really did do what you're saying, then we'll deal with that together. Like, we'll face that and get through that together.
She's going right back to her younger self.
Yes.
I think her more hopeful, like, oh well, if you don't pray to the stars, then I'll do it for you, kind of thing. Like
right.
she was younger than him, but she seemed to, I don't know, maybe push him in ways that he felt uncomfortable sometimes.
Sure.
Like, hey, if you don't want to do this, then I'll do it for you, or that kind of thing. So.
Yeah. So you say goodbye to all the people. You say goodbye to Gav, say goodbye to Karen and all the other people there in the hideaway. And you head out to Rosaria.
Oh, did you see the Moogle, by the way?
Yes. I actually really liked what they did with the Moogle in this game.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, you haven't played Final Fantasy 13 or some of these other games. I think it's 13-2, where one of the party members is a Moogle. And anytime they've had a Moogle actually speak, like, out loud,
it's always
voice acting. No, it's always been a really annoying, high-pitched voice.
Oh, gosh, I hate that.
Yes.
I hate that.
So this handling of this weird Moogle language that just sounds kind of like the sounds they had in, say, Final Fantasy 9 or something. I can't make that sound, but that's the sort of sound that they made before voice acting was introduced to Final Fantasy. They sort of made a language out of that, and they just made them make those sounds. I like that way better
than trying to give a voice.
Than try to give them a cutesy voice. Way better. So I loved it. I loved the way that they introduced Moogles here. There was also an interview.
What about the Final Fantasy VI voice from the ad? From the commercial?
Oh yeah, see, I would like that better than the cutesy voice, for sure. But no, there was actually an interview where they had almost decided against putting Moogles in the game at all because of the tone of the story they're going for.
Right.
But anyway, I'm glad that they put it in, and I liked the way they did it. It felt good. It was like the first time seeing a Moogle speak with actual words, making an actual sound, that I was like, oh, okay, like that doesn't feel like I want to blow my brains out every time that character talks. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, I liked the way they did that. I hope that in the future they would continue to kind of do Moogles in that way. But anyways, let's see. Yeah. Gav, you say goodbye to Gav. There was something in that conversation before you head out that I was going to say, but I'm forgetting it now. Oh, he tells you about Martha's Rest, which is an inn in a town village on the way there, and she is sort of in with the hideaway. She sort of works with them. And he's like, if you stop there, I mean, basically, like, don't just talk to a lot of people because
just go straight to her.
Your mark. The people are not going to take kindly to you there. But she'll help you if you go find her. So that's where they go next, basically, straight there. And there's a quick quest where you have to go find a carpenter to fix the bridge so that you can continue on to Rosaria.
That's right, yeah.
But the really interesting part of this whole section, this section at Martha's Rest introduces the concept of petrification of the bearers.
That was crazy.
Which is an idea that I really liked. I really liked the idea that magic users, so bearers, people who are born with the innate ability to use magic without crystals, the more ether they channel, the more magic they use, the sort of quicker they go to their deaths, in which they basically petrify and turn to stone. And it's a very painful death. And so the fact that they're made into slaves and forced to do magic because crystals are a limited resource, right? So we could use all the same magic that these bearers do,
right?
But eventually we would mine all of these crystal mountains and they'd be gone. So in order to preserve crystals, they forced these magic users, bearers, into slavery and forced them to do magic innately. And what happens is they slowly die.
So you just treat them as a crystal. You treat them as a tool, and then once the crystal, I assume crystals are finite. Once you use the crystal up, it's just a rock now, right? Or it's just
or
gone,
crumbles away, or
it's
whatever.
It's not a valuable anymore.
Yes.
That's really interesting. So what you say there makes me think of the way that they treat bearers in a different light. Instead of I hate bearers because, like, bearers, like, what's the point of bearers? Like, you guys are stupid. I hate you because of you were born different. Instead, I actually look at it more as guilt and shame.
Yes.
That they're like, society has decided that in order to exist, we have to use these people and throw them away afterwards, and we are not allowed to feel bad about that.
Yes.
If we feel bad about it, our society dies and crumbles, and we lose to the neighbors,
Yes.
right? But in order to have this kind of thing work, you have to detach yourself from these people.
Yes.
You have to pretend that they aren't actually people.
Yes.
Otherwise, this whole thing doesn't work. That's fascinating. That's better than just the blanket, like, you know, oh, I hate you because you're a bear, and I just, like, there's no sense to it.
No.
This gives sense to it, and it's a deep sense. It's their own sense of personal shame.
Yes.
That's very interesting.
I like this a lot, and you can see it having been set up by the governing body, by the system. The system of governance, whether it's the empire or whatever, they look at their resources because it's their job to manage resources to, govern the people.
Right.
These crystal mountains won't last forever.
No.
We rely on their blessings to survive. Without them, we can't live. This is their belief.
Yes.
So we have to preserve them
It's
as
like
long as possible.
The assumption, yeah.
So, here are these people that are born who have the ability to basically do what the crystals do. We will create a system in which we convince the people that they are less than human and that they are tools to be used, so that we can use them as the tools, and this will be accepted by the larger society.
What I'm saying is, and that's right, but it's hard to convince people that these people aren't people.
Yes.
There had to be a way that these people would agree with that.
Yes.
And that's the way, basically. It's like
you can't survive without
you have to
using them this
act
way.
This way, yeah.
Which is not true, as Sid comes to find out.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
And that's why Sid's so pissed, and he's on a crusade.
Yes.
Right?
Right. So we'll get into him in a little bit. There's actually a whole ATL entry about Ramu, and how the dominant of Ramu comes to like have a certain wisdom associated with that icon, and it starts to see the world as it is.
Nice.
So whoever is the dominant sort of has their eyes opened up to how the world really works.
It's like the book The Giver.
Yeah.
the one that's born,
So this is why Sid is essentially becomes aware at all that these crystals are the problem. They need to be destroyed. It's not.
Very interesting.
We don't rely on their blessing, which goes back to the whole monologue at the very beginning of the game, the shadow of the crystal shadow and all that stuff, right, which we talked about last time.
Well, but this is so interesting, though, because I feel like the world has to be really hard for people to accept this type of a system.
Yes.
Like, the world has to be really hard. And it seems to be quite difficult. And if they don't do it, they lose their whole civilization because the neighboring nation will do it.
Yeah.
And you can't survive otherwise. I don't know. I just like that a lot better than what, the more tropey, like, these people are just racist and that's just it kind of thing. It's more like there's a reason why people think it's wrong. It's still wrong, but it's not just like such an obvious thing that everybody can just look at.
It's not just because.
No, it's for survival. It is literally for survival. A survival
reason why the system was set up. But that's the greatest thing about it. The whole concept of this in the first place for me is that the reason is not true.
Right. That's what I love.
The reason was assumed from the beginning. And they have basically been exploiting these people and self-perpetuating the problem that they are trying to address by using them in the first place.
Oh, what was it? We talked about this so recently. I think maybe it was in the last game that we played.
Automata.
Yeah, but what is it? The problem of scarcity, or the problem of zero sum? Like, you assume it's a zero-sum game, so if I don't do it, then they will do it?
Yes.
And it's like, well, if everybody didn't do it, the world would be a better place.
Yes.
But because you know that if you don't do it, they will do it, then you're going to do it too. And you end up participating in and perpetuating a system that could easily not be that way.
Yes.
But because you think that you don't trust your neighbors, then you participate in making it that way. Even if you do have like Rama, even if you do have the wisdom to understand, like, whoa, it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
but I don't know about those guys, so I'm still going to get mine while I can.
Yes. And that's the way
the
those
world
in
works,
power
honestly.
will
Yeah.
think.
Oh, for sure, yes.
To maintain their power or whatnot.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure yet to what extent, say, the Emperor Sambrek knows what Sid knows. Maybe they don't, maybe they do. I don't know yet. But
yeah, we don't know much about
regardless of that, I think it's true to life in the sense that, like, what you're saying is true. If everyone came to an enlightenment of this topic, well, we could stop. But what if Willowed continues to use it?
Here's the example.
Then what?
Denuclearization, right?
Sure.
Every country on Earth, if you could poll the people and say, hey, would it be good if this world had no more nukes in it? You'd get 80, 90%. Like, yes, I agree with that.
Yes.
In probably every country in the entire world.
Right.
Yet there's still tons of billions of nukes.
Yes.
Okay, tens of thousands of nukes all over. Everyone agrees that the world would be better without them.
Yes.
But who's going to get rid of their nukes first?
Right.
Not me, right?
Yeah.
That's what everyone says. And it's like, okay, well, here you go.
So
The world keeps spiraling downwards.
It almost doesn't matter because it feels like either way, whether the rulers of the world are aware of this or not, that they probably would have continued doing what they're doing anyways.
Right.
The system was built this way, and it's really hard after however many generations of which that system has been in place. And the people believe in it, and
for sure,
to then start changing that. And this is
to change it, you'd have to trust your neighbors.
Yes,
right? And I don't think there's a country on earth that trusts their neighbors.
No. And this is where Sid is coming from and saying, like, I think his line is something like, "We can't talk our way out of this one." Right? Like, there's no amount of talking.
Oh, you're right.
That is going to actually change this at this point. We have to do something really, really radical at this point, which is destroy the mother crystal of Sambrek.
Destroy, right? Well, essentially destroy the world as they know it.
And
right, you better be right if you're going to do that.
Knowing that in the short term,
it's going to be painful.
It's going to be worse for the people you're trying to help.
Yes,
because now they're going to be even worse to them. They're going to try even harder to keep the system in place.
Dang it, we're getting too much.
We're going a little
episode.
further, but like this is all being set up by what happens here.
Yeah.
Just introduction that petrification is the result of forcing these bearers to use magic the way they do. I loved that idea.
Me too, because there's a hermetic principle, right? As within, so without, right? That the human is a microcosm of the cosmos itself. That as the bearers use ether, their body turns to stone. That let's scale that up. Let's talk about the planet. Let's talk about the country, the nation, the land. As the land continues to have ether used on it and through it and by it and all of that, then the land slowly begins to turn to ash or dust or stone or whatever this blight is that's happening, right? So as the magic will kill the host, well, is the host the person or is the host the planet, right? And either way, it's like it's the same effect, right? So you kind of see that as above, so below kind of idea working here, which is really cool. So that way, symbolically, things line up, and this is a really cool like thematic point where they're able to hit it on multiple levels and say that like, think of the land as a person. Now that person is being forced to use magic and drain all of its life. It's gonna die. You can't do that.
Yeah,
very good.
So, and the scene is that where they show this is pretty effective too. I mean, they go to deliver some medicine from Martha to the abbot who's watching over these bearers. But what she basically does is all the profits that she makes from her tavern inn, she buys slaves that are on the doorstep of death. She could not afford somebody who could still be used for work, but she buys the slaves that are like basically petrifying.
Well, because they're cheaper.
Yes.
Right? Those are the people are looking to get rid of those slaves.
The only type of slave she could afford.
Yeah.
But she spends all of her profits buying them so that she could give them medicine and help their dying be not as painful and terrible. And so that's what this abbot does, basically. He just stays with the people.
He's a beast.
He teaches them Grieger's principles. He stays with them so they don't die alone.
He's converted his whole church, because as soon as you go in the church, because at first he's like, the church is closed, like, don't come in. You know? And then he finds out who we are. And you go in and you realize that he's taken out all the pews. He's taken everything out. It is just hospital beds, basically. Just like bed upon bed, where there would normally be like seating arrangements somehow. And it's just a sick house for sick people.
Right. And so you're seeing these people, I mean, their hand like turn to stone, and the pain that they're feeling as they're sitting there just like petrifying to death.
Right, until
slowly.
like their lungs turn and then it's over, right?
And so then they're delivering medicine that he gives to them to help it not be so painful.
You know what else I love is the idea of petrification does have, it links up to like Final Fantasy, like just the battle effects and status effects and stuff like that. Like it links up to the world, to the universe, the general universe of Final Fantasy as a thing that happens. And in this game, in most games, it's easy to cure that.
Yes.
But in this game, it's like they don't have that cure.
They don't have the soft potions in this world.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's killing them, you know. But you can. I like the way that it connects into previous Final Fantasy entries.
Yes, I do
this
too.
game is lacking a little bit in some of that.
Yes,
but there's a few key points where it's like, oh, that's so Final Fantasy.
Yeah, I felt the same way, and I loved how it played into the whole concept of maybe sort of the thematic core of the game we're talking about.
Yeah.
But then linked it, like you're saying, into this very Final Fantasy thing that you almost took it. You almost, what's the word? Took for granted. It's just like, oh, the petrification status effect is a thing.
Yeah.
But you never really. It was never really used in a way like this. I guess in Final Fantasy IX they did with the petrification of the evil forest.
Right. Well, then
and,
this is
we
like
got to
that,
go
then.
rescue our friend who got petrified in there.
That's right.
But this is kind of the next level of that, where. It's kind of horrifying to see it happening in the context of this game in which it's happening. And you realize like just how bad the system that is in place in this world is, and how badly it needs to be overthrown and overturned and totally like rebuilt. Because
you felt bad for the bearers before.
Yeah.
Now you're like, it's even worse, right? It's so much worse than you even realized before that. Because at first it's just like, oh, he has to live a slave. Now it's like, no, he has to die the slowest, most painful death that you can imagine as his body slowly succumbs to this petrification.
Yeah.
It added a whole nother element to it. But it also made me understand why a woman would be really upset that her child, as we see an example, that her child was born a bearer. It's like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? My kid's going to die early of stone petrification and I have to watch? No, thank you. Here, government, you have him. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go back and tell my other son that I just miscarried.
Yeah.
You know, like, that wasn't your brother is what she says to him. Or because she's kind of open. She's like, I gave the bloody thing away. I can't. But imagine what it, you know, I still don't think most mothers would do this. But in that kind of a system where life is really hard, resources are scarce, and your kid is something that is going to live a tough life and die early, guaranteed of a horribly painful death. And do you want to watch that, or do you want to kind of just pretend that that didn't happen?
Yeah.
Now, and that's part of what I mean when I talk about the guilt and shame of the people is the reason they don't want to get close to bearers.
Yeah.
They don't want to treat you like a person because they don't want to acknowledge that, you know, the way the world works, or the way that the government works and the whole system works for them is so like geared against them that they just don't stand a chance. And you don't, and it's one step to just be like, oh, just ignore him. You don't have to be mean to him. Just ignore him. But like the culture needs to reinforce that. And it turns into, you got to be mean to him.
Yes.
You can't.
Well, that's exactly.
You can't be nice. You can't even just be neutral. You have to treat them negatively. Yeah. Because otherwise you're going to feel so bad about what's happening here. You can't think about that. Life's hard. Just you have to deal with it.
Well, that's the easiest way to enforce a system like this as a governing body is to create an ideology, let's say a religion, if it's a theocracy like Sambrek, in which reinforces this concept of the people will enforce this system for us. They will believe in it. Yes. We will teach them from the time they're little children, like the little boy. Yeah. You know, that's not really my brother, right? Like, we teach them from
that wasn't your
a young age
there was
that they're not
of
humans like us. There's something wrong with them. They're to be exploited. They're tools. And then they will keep the system going. We don't have to, you know, once that's in place, I'm sure it takes a few generations of people who weren't born in that system dying, and then
building culture takes a long time.
Yes, but once it's there, then it's really hard to break out of it.
And it helps too if there is some natural element to it. Like, it does suck to have a bearer. So like, just the culture doesn't need that big of a nudge in order to kind of be pushed to that point.
Yes.
right? This actually, stuff like this did happen in the Middle Ages, but there's a creature called a changeling. Have you ever heard of a changeling before?
Well, in fantasy stories, not in real life.
Okay, it's not real per se, but there was an old 1,000-year-old legend that, if your kid started exhibiting negative health or poor symptoms, or maybe was developing some disabilities that weren't apparent when they were first born, but that became apparent later on, the assumption amongst lots of people, and this was a story that was told all around, was that a bunch of evil fairies came in and stole your child and replaced it with this.
Changeling.
It's called a changeling, and that's not your real kid. That's not your child. And then you can now tell your brothers and sisters, yeah, we've got this changeling here, but it's not your actual brother. And you end up once again, life was hard, right? And it's like, okay, this kid, this changeling is not your real brother, and we're going to have it do chores and basically be the little Cinderella, and we can treat it less than human because something went wrong. And obviously it's not our real kid because our real kid was fine. So our real kid must be dead or somewhere with the fairies. And then they gave us this piece of junk, and now we can kick its butt and force it to do work for us. Yeah. That is a thing that happened in the Middle Times.
That's actually really interesting as a real world parallel, because I was not aware of that.
Yeah,
that actually kind of changes the way that I see this in some ways, because I was a little bit iffy on that whole little scene we're talking about with the mother.
Me too, because it was so obvious, and I kind of rolled my eyes at first.
The presentation of it it comes across as so black and white and surface that it feels like there's not a lot of nuance.
Yes,
I was thinking to myself. I was thinking to myself, I would have liked it better had people been gossiping about the mother, but she's actually torn up between the beliefs that she's been handed down about what a bearer is, and maybe the way she's treated them as an adolescent, her peers, that some of them awakened, and the way she treated them, and then having a child that is one. This was my baby, someone I was connected to, the maternal instinct kicking in and being like, and just not knowing what to do. I
would have preferred that on its face.
Yes.
But this way gives us a little more insight into the culture.
Well, if they had somehow built this teaching of the changeling into the doctrine of Grieger or something like that.
Well, it doesn't have to be religious. It can just be a folk tale that people tell. And that, because, people still you still believed that there were werewolves in the forest and dragons in the ocean and stuff, like 1,000 years ago. And I don't know that those were necessarily religious teachings per se, but it was definitely culturally propagated, amongst people of a certain, like in Europe and stuff.
Right. So anyway, it's probably enough time on that, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about with that coming up. But I liked the idea a lot. Is really the gist of it. I thought it was very clever. For all the reasons we explained.
See, it's so funny because I love talking about this because I didn't come up with that. Wasn't in my notes.
Yeah, mine either.
30 minutes was not in my notes. The only note I wrote was some random woman gave birth to a bear and is all pissed about it. That was my note, and it turned into this thing. I don't know. I love talking about.
That's why I love the podcast, because it's not only even in the comments, because we get a lot of great comments that bring things up I didn't think about before, or that challenge the way I think or whatever, but also in the course of our conversation, there's just something said that sparks something, and there's something said that sparks something that you didn't think of before. This is why I wanted to do this podcast this way to begin with, because you just when we come together sort of as a group, right, and we're all talking about it, I have gained such a deeper level of knowledge and appreciation for the games we talked about than I ever would have just researching it on my own. And so
it's the collective
group, unconscious
the group analysis.
Yeah,
I love it.
I love it. Okay, so let's get to the next scene here. So,
another thing too, just in general, is that it is mentioned, at least by what's her name, Martha, that under Elwing's rule, the bearers had it better.
Yes,
it wasn't as rough, which is so interesting because, like you had mentioned before, it was still rough.
It's still
like, to
bad.
consider that as the good times.
Yes.
Is like, oh man, this is a rough.
This actually brings
this
a
is rough
whole other
culture.
element of it that gets us into our next scene, though.
Oh, good.
Because somebody brought that up. Like, you guys didn't even talk about how someone was upset with me because of the way I had talked about Clive
not doing enough. Or
not
something.
doing enough.
Yeah.
And, you didn't even bring up the fact that the Rossfields had gone to great lengths to make working conditions better for their branded, their bearers or whatever.
We didn't go into it, no.
And so that it's true we didn't bring it up, but my point was it's still not an excuse to own slaves.
It's still like he was better.
We treat our slaves better is not an excuse for having slaves. So that was my point, is that not to say Clive's a horrible human being, he should feel so much guilt and shame. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is he's going to find out through the course of this story, as the tables get flipped in the system he grew up in which he benefited from before, he's going to be at the bottom of that. And he's going to learn how wrong it was.
Right.
And that doesn't make him a bad person.
Right.
That means that he was raised in a system in which he, like everyone else, thought this was normal and fine.
Of course, he was 15 or something, right?
And he's going to learn that he was wrong. And that's okay to learn that you were wrong. It's okay to learn that you were given an advantage over someone else for no really good reason. And that you should do what you can being in the position you're in, which is, I have the blessing of these freaking icons, and I'm really, really strong, and I can fight. And I can actually do something about it.
With great power comes great responsibility.
You got to do
possibly
something.
Like the just truest. If scriptures was one page, and that was one of the few things written on that one page, of the few things that I would consider that should be written on that page, that would be one of them.
Yeah.
Right. If you got a lot of power, you got a lot of responsibility, and you should use it properly.
Yeah. So the more power you have, it's not you feel guilty for having it. It's do something to help people who don't have power with it. Do what you can with what you have. Yeah. And he wasn't.
And he had a lot.
He had a lot, and all he was focused on was protecting his brother.
Hey, if the slaves dropped an apple, he'd pick it up for him. You're being way too hard on him. As the slaves carried 300 apples into his castle, he carried one. And so, you're being a little too hard on him, I think.
The point is not that he's a bad person or anyone should be sitting there going, well, you suck. The point is,
which you weren't doing.
Hey, Clive, you can actually do a lot more.
Yeah.
And it's your responsibility to do a lot more.
I think when you said that, I think you were hinting at what the future of the game has to offer, which is, hey, Clive is going to realize this.
It's clear that this is where the game was going.
Obvious at this point,
Yeah. So, anyway, but what I really like, in addition to the conversation we've been having, is you get to the next town, which is where Murdoch's wife is, right? And she takes you in. And she explains that Murdoch died and that Clive is again stricken with guilt because his flames are what killed his mentor.
Because she just says he never came home.
Right.
And he's like, oh, that was me.
Yes. And he
knows.
Yeah. So it's just like his guilt is just like layers and layers, bricks being thrown into his backpack, so to speak. And there's a great scene between him and Jill that night when they're looking up at the moon again. And
with the little red star right there. Full moon, once again.
Yeah, and he explains these things, that it was him that killed Murdoch and how bad he feels.
Because he couldn't sleep in her house. He's like, I can't even share a roof with her. I don't deserve it. Right?
Yes. And basically, like, I don't even know why I'm alive. This was the only thing that gave my life purpose, was taking out Joshua's killer and getting revenge. Right. And now I don't even have that anymore. Why am I still breathing? And he's like crying. He's like breaking down.
That was a really, vulnerable, surprisingly vulnerable moment there.
Yeah. And then she
I liked it.
Has a really great sort of response where I felt the same way. Like, I wanted it to end when you were fighting me as an assassin. Right. I hoped you guys had killed me. Yeah. And we were both at that same point. But now we have each other to lean on. Right. And there's this great moment where she starts to kind of lean in and he doesn't know what to do. It's unfortunate they haven't done anything with that romance since this moment.
But hey, we'll see.
But I really liked that scene. I thought it was great.
It's so funny too. It's so good because it's the what is it? The like sexual tension shows up that you didn't feel it before then because this is so good. I wrote the camera shows them lingering just a touch too long.
Yes,
and the sexual tension shows up, and when she says it shows up around the time when she says that the heavens have a plan for us, And then that happens. Then all of a sudden, then it gets really weird and awkward, right? It sounds like the plan is that they are fated to be in love.
Sure.
And that fate is dictated by forces beyond their control. Because it's not like they're choosing. Like love, it's so funny, especially this kind of romantic situation, that like it's almost like the mantle of love just descends upon them from the ether. You know, it's not, they didn't choose it. It's like the fates, the things that govern their fate are present right there. The heavens are dictating what happens. They don't have any control over it. But they're falling in love, and maybe we'll see where that goes.
Yeah, right.
Sometime.
But
not soon.
Yeah, the next morning they get up and they're about to leave, and there's somebody who says, "Hey, there's a bearer in this town who used to work in the kitchens."
Yeah, an old guy
at Rosalith.
Yeah,
and it would mean the world to him because Murdoch's wife gave him his father's old clothes. So he looks a lot. Yeah. He looks a lot like young Elwyn.
Yeah, he's got the red, the vest, and the tunic, and all that.
Yeah, and so somebody else recognizes him. Oh my gosh, you're Clive Rossfield. There's this guy who it would make his world. He waits every day for his lord to come back. Please go talk to him, right? And this is what I was struck by in this scene, kind of on the back of the conversation we're just having about a system being perpetuated by the people. Yeah. Like the government instills it. They sort of brainwash the people into it in however long that takes. They accept it. Now they're the ones perpetuating it, the people themselves, right? And the fact that the Rossfields were better to their slaves than the Empire is, for example, which is something Martha mentions. I knew that the Empire treated their slaves like shit, but like I had no idea how bad it was until
Annabella
the Empire
showed up.
essentially annexed this land.
Yes.
And now we're seeing it full scale, right?
Yeah.
So what's interesting to me is that the bearer in question, when you go and you find him, he's an old man. He's like he's almost like a dementia patient at this point. Doesn't really understand reality.
Amazing,
what's going on around him.
Became that old, given that all the other bearers would die younger.
That's a question that I have.
It's. I think the answer is that.
The Empire works their bearers way harder.
You're right.
And they die way earlier.
And it's been 13 years. Because my thinking is, but the Rossfields treated their bearers well. So their bearers didn't suffer the same fate.
They didn't. They weren't tasked as hard, and so they don't petrify as quickly.
So maybe that's why that guy was able to be older.
Yes.
But it has been 13 years since then. So,
yes. And they probably haven't been using magic and whatnot in those 13 years, because they've been sort of refuged here away from being
that's true. Well, then that would explain it there. That would explain it.
Also, I had the question, how is Clive not aware in this world that bearers become petrified? But it could be answered that way too.
That the Rossfields
didn't push their bearers so hard, so maybe the petrification was either super rare or just didn't happen in their territory because they weren't pushed the same way as the Empire does. There could be the answer to that. But my point in all of this is that the slave wanted to go back to working. He had been free in this village for 13 years.
He wanted to go back
and all he wanted to do is go back and be a slave again.
Yeah.
And this is something that can be very true, too. You get a group of people, the people who are being exploited in a system, who see a situation in which it's better, or maybe like their lives were a little better under these people. And it's like they're willing to accept a certain, become complacent at a certain level. And not go all the way to being equals. And they themselves can perpetuate it.
Yes, of
course. They themselves can be a
Yes.
part of that perpetuation of the system.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I feel I kind of was struck by that, by these particular branded or bearers of the Rossfields, where it's like they're not necessarily even interested in their freedom either. They just want a master who's nicer to them.
That's true. Like, you're going to serve someone anyway.
Years of brainwashing. That means he's an old man, right?
Right. Like, you don't get away for. You got to wait for the generation to pass.
It's not just about breaking the barrier of the mode of belief for the people in power to change it. You got to also retrain the people being exploited to think a different way. It's like such a freaking like deep problem to be addressed. That takes a super long time to actually fix. Generations of time to fix.
Oh yeah, generations. Yeah. Harriet Tubman said, and she did she was the operated the Underground Railroad.
The Underground Railroad, yeah.
And she said that she could have Well, this is a direct quote. She said, "I could have saved a lot more slaves if only they knew they were slaves."
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And these were people who were, at least looking back,
Yeah.
like from 2023, looking back 150, 170 years, it's like, wasn't it obvious that they
Yeah,
were slaves?
right.
But even in those conditions, it wasn't always so obvious. And a lot of slavery, it's in your mind.
Yes.
Right? It's not so much the chains on your arms. It's like, it's a mentality.
Yes.
That I am just a slave. That's what I am. And you can be convinced of that, and then you live it out and you perpetuate it amongst
Yes.
the generations. Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And that's what's so hard about it is we can look back and see that conflict of that time period as so black and white and easy. It's like, clearly this was wrong, but for them, this was a nuanced conversation about whether or not slaves should exist or not.
Yeah.
And there were people
And there's different gradations.
fighting on both sides of it, right?
Yeah.
There was this, and then there were probably people in the middle who were like, well, we got to...
Of course.
Right? But then that's the thing
Yeah.
is that the people who will look back on what we're talking about today will look back on it as if it was so simple and so easy and so black and white.
obvious. Yeah.
And so this has got me thinking about
Yeah.
a lot of things going on today. And okay, maybe it's not as hard an answer as I thought it was.
Right.
You know, like maybe. Anyways, I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but that's where my mind was going.
This game is going to keep that present, I think, in the mind.
When I was playing it, and as we've been talking about it, it's kind of making me think more about that.
Yeah.
Like there's probably easier answers than we like to think they are. We just haven't gotten a consensus about it yet.
Sure.
The way that we do now about
Once a truly brilliant idea shows up, and it will be recognized, and then we'll wonder how anybody ever got through life without realizing this obvious truth.
yes,
But it's only obvious once someone points it out.
Yes.
Right? And in so many ways, we may be looking past it or something, or it may not be so obvious.
so
Another thing, too, well, I'll bring this up later. But
Okay.
I'll talk about it more later, but I'll just say, once again, in the book of Exodus, when Moses leads the Jews out of Egypt, and then they're in the desert,
yeah,
and they wanted to go back to Egypt.
right,
They were like, when we were slaves, we at least had food. Like, we want to go back to Egypt.
Yeah.
And it's basically the exact same kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Just, told, and this is thousands and thousands of years old, this type of situation.
right,
I also have a lot of other things to say real quick,
Okay.
because some of my notes are, we skipped a bunch. First off, back at the other town, in that church, we got our first really good, clear look at the goddess Grieger in the light with, like, well-framed and all that. And she has a winged dragon about her feet,
yes,
which I'm going to talk about more later, but it's really interesting. So the circle doesn't, in this case, the circle is not centered on her heart, but her navel. So maybe the placement of the circle isn't that important. It just needs to be somewhere there. Circles will become very important very soon as well, probably in the next episode. And then I wrote down here, this reminds me of the old medieval depictions of Mary, the mother of Jesus, stepping on the head of a serpent or a dragon. But in this rendition, the dragon is about her feet, and they're coexisting. They're living together, right? Like the dragon's her pet or her guardian. I'll have more to say about that in the next episode.
yeah,
But the woman, there's the circle above, which is like the heavens, and then there's the dragon below at her feet. And then there's the woman, the goddess, that kind of, she's like the conduit, or she connects the two, right? So the dragon and the circle are separate, but then the goddess can kind of unite both.
yeah,
Anyways, really good stuff. Now we've got this, the whole thing in the church. The priests tell, this is really good. The priest kind of reads his last rites,
to
like the last
dying
blessing,
bearer, yeah.
and he tells him that he will rise again, right? So this seems to be an implication of, like, they believe in something like a bodily resurrection or something like that.
Oh yeah,
In
that's right.
eschatology.
He says you will rise again.
You will rise again,
and receive all the happiness denied to you in this life, or something like that.
Yeah.
I thought about the
thought that was
Phoenix, and I
interesting.
thought about
Yes,
like,
me too. Yeah, and these
anyway.
were Rossfield people, right?
Yes,
So it could be.
But Grigor, I'm pretty sure, is a imperial
You're right.
religion. It's like the theocracy.
But
Is the
there
Grigor
could be some flavors, some distinct flavors around.
Yeah.
Even Catholicism and the Orthodox Christian religions, each country kind of has a
Yes.
slightly different way that they.
Well, and
treat
on
it.
top of that, Rosaria was annexed by the Empire several years
Recently.
before,
Yeah.
like 860, when Clive was young. So,
Yes. So it hasn't been that long.
yeah. Anyway.
But even still, maybe the Empire teaches this as well. I don't know. But
That's what I'm saying. Is I think that the Grieger, the religion of the Empire, and the Phoenix, the symbol of the Rossfield House, are sort of maybe being mixed into this speech about rising again and whatever.
That happens.
Yeah.
That is the thing. The pagan, and then that kind of stuff happens. Okay, and then of course we already mentioned that Sid is having trouble. His hand and arm are discolored. Sid's there. I was surprised to see him there when he shows up.
Oh yeah.
I was like, "What the heck? You sent us here, and then you just showed up anyways." Like, okay.
There's actually some.
See
There
ya.
was a couple of really interesting things there too that I skipped over. I just remembered. First of all, he talks about a girl he once knew back in the day.
It sounded
who was
like
a slave
Benedicta
to her fate. I
in my
thought that
mind.
too at first.
Oh, really?
But
You think
now
it's someone
I'm
else?
thinking it might be someone else.
Ooh, interesting.
Based
Okay.
on something I'm not going to go into yet. But he talks about someone he knew back in the day who was a slave to her fate.
Yeah.
And how he's like giving this as a warning to Clive, like you can break free of the cycle, break free of your fate. This is like we said.
That just means that
very-
was your fate, but you know, whatever.
Well, exactly, right? But this is kind of very common in Japanese games in general
fate
because
and-
it's an Eastern philosophy, the wheel of
Right.
samsara, and breaking free of your fate or
Yes,
free of the
escaping,
cycle, escaping the cycle.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you see it in all fantasy stories almost that come out of Japan, whether it's the Souls games or whatever. There's always a cycle that needs to be broken. Final Fantasy X did this. This game is doing that. But in any case, he uses a crystal to light his cigar.
Oh,
in
yeah,
that scene.
that's right.
He, even though he could
With lightning.
light it himself with it, because the dominants can use magic without crystals,
Right.
like bearers can, but they can
Yeah.
also summon icons. But and like Benedicta did that, she lit it with her own power. Later
Right.
on, you'll see Clive light a cigar with his own power, not with a crystal. But Sid chooses to use a crystal. And I think
He's
it's because
conserving that
he's
energy.
conserving because his arm is petrifying. He's like slowly meeting the same fate because obviously he's been using the iconic abilities of Ramu for years and years and years, and it's like taking its toll on his body. So I liked that attention to detail there. I thought that was nice. But I also think the person he's talking about in that scene is going to be a setup for something coming later. I don't think it would. I don't think he was just referring to Benedicta, who is now a plot point that's behind us.
Yeah, you think it's a future. Okay, you're actually that's a fair point. That's a fair point.
What was the note that you had before the abbot and the last rites? Because there was something you said there I wanted to comment on.
The rise, the resurrection, and then looks like Sid is in trouble, his hand and arm. Oh,
Before
they showed up.
Before that.
He showed up. Oh, even before that?
Before the abbot.
It was about the goddess Grieger and the statue? And
Yes,
the way that
I was
looked?
just going to say the Empire Sambrek, they have the dragoons. So they have they have like a almost
Well, and Drake is a...
the
Drake
names
means
of the
dragon.
crystals.
Yeah.
Drake's head.
Drake's head is the
tail,
dragon's head.
Drake's breath.
Right.
These are the names, and Drake's spine. Those
So
are the
it's
names
all
of
named
the four
after a
mother
dragon.
crystals.
Yeah.
So, but they have a level of reverence for dragons in general that is probably associated with this symbol of Grieger and the dragon. So, yeah, they like worship dragons almost.
That's cool.
In the Empire. So that's why that's a part of that symbol.
That makes sense. That's awesome. I like that, actually. And then, of course... But Sid tells her when he tells this story, he says that I thought that I was liberating others, but instead I don't know, it was hard to tell what he was really saying, but he said what I should have done was given them the hammer, but instead I just used the hammer and ended up hammering them.
Hammer, yep.
Yeah, with my hammer instead of letting them help themselves.
Yeah.
Anyways, I thought that was really good.
Yeah, this is going to play more into kind of his character arc moving into the part we're not going to get to today that we played up to. But I'll keep a pin in that for later.
And then there's that stone in the center of town, and there's a guy who's standing next to it, and he's like, "Was that stone glowing before?" I thought that was great because those stones, it's really good. It's fun.
Right.
And then, so as Jill is talking to Clive, she says, "Oh, remember when I prayed to Metia?"
Yeah.
She goes, "The goddess answered my prayers, basically, or Metia. My prayers were answered." And Clive's like, "What are you talking about? That like everything has sucked, and our lives have basically got destroyed, and we both want to die now."
Right.
And she goes, "Yeah, but I prayed that you would come back, and
here you are.
Here you are." It's like 13 years later, but you came back. And so
Yep.
she believes in fate very heavily.
Yep.
And then the comment about the camera and all that stuff. And then I've got this one here, and this is where I made the note, but I just kind of want to put it formally the way that I wrote it. The blight, talking about the blight. As the bearers use too much magic and are overworked, their bodies turn to stone and life leaves them. The planet may be in a similar state. The more magic is taken from the planet, the less it can sustain life, and the more likely it is to become desolate and immobile.
What you're talking about is 100% correct. This is what Sid's conclusion is.
Right.
That the ether that is being sucked out of the land and the blight they're talking about is not some sort of invading blight force illness.
Right.
It's just ether being sucked away from the land by the mother crystals.
Yes.
The mother crystals are constantly channeling and bringing in ether, which is sort of a natural element in the world, and it's just being gobbled up by these mother crystals. And so that's why he's saying we got to destroy the mother crystals to stop the blight, because they're the ones taking the ether in the first place.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
And then in that same thing, he says, if you take away the land's life force, then problems are all that's left.
Yeah.
So, anyways, it's pretty clear where he's going here, but I didn't really get it until a few hours later. Then we go to the Phoenix Gate ruins.
Yes, and so this is probably we're gonna leave off after this section. So there's a lot more of the fallen ruins. There's towers, there's doors and gates, there's all kinds of these structures that are fallen.
Whole dungeon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you get there, and I loved, as you first arrive, you see the crater that was created by
when they went
Ifrit.
down.
Yeah, the hellfire,
crazy.
and it just like blew everything apart, and he's just seeing the aftermath of what he did. He's just like, holy fetch.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But they see the hooded man there.
Yep.
Continuing to kind of like guide him inside. He goes in there, and you get to this door where it's supposed to be that only the dominant, the Phoenix dominant specifically, is supposed to be able to enter this door.
Yep.
And it's where Joshua was supposed to go, the apothecary,
to
speak with the ancestors, right?
Yeah.
The fallen ancestors.
Yes.
Right?
And it says that this whole place, they call it a relic of the fallen, right? So, anyways, I have stuff later, but we're going to bring it up next episode.
Yeah.
Really good stuff.
But because Clive has been given a blessing of the Phoenix, he has some of the Phoenix's power.
Yeah.
He finds that he is able to touch the door and open it and go in. So he goes in, and it's just like, what on earth is this? This
it was
is
alien
unbelievable.
Stuff.
I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah.
And they're being attacked by all of these
aliens, basically.
different
like machine,
almost like machines, right?
Yeah.
Made from the same stuff that the buildings themselves are made of. If you look at the ATL for these enemies, it'll say that they can't be destroyed because they're created from the same element as the structures.
Right.
But you can break the plates off and they sort of just like lose their life. But like the actual element cannot be destroyed itself.
Very interesting.
So anyway, these things are attacking you. You're going further and further in.
Yep.
It's getting crazier, and you come to this mural with what looks
this was cool,
strikingly similar to Sefer Sephiroth, the final phase of Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII. The wings, the four wings up here, and then the two wings going down from the legs.
Yeah. Does he have horns too?
No, but it's just similar in the senses. There's the six wings.
The six wings. Yeah.
But it clearly looks like a dark god of some kind.
Oh, for sure. And it's so cool because underneath the god is like this chaos, this chaotic nothing, just like lines and just scribbles basically. And then it comes up to this like almost a peak, but there's like a crater in it, almost like a volcano.
Yep.
And then he's standing above it, right, with the wings, and the way the wings are positioned, it looks like an ascent. Mm-hmm. So it's like a demon descending up from like the chaotic underworld and going upwards. And he's got these really long horns kind of staring at you. It's all black against the wall. And we haven't seen anything like this in this game. But Clive seems unusually drawn to it. Right?
Yes.
He's just like, he feels like he recognizes it.
Yes.
But we don't know what it is at the moment.
Yep.
But that was a really cool like mural. It makes it look like a demon with wings and horns and all that stuff. It's really good stuff. But one other thing I wanted to mention before we get to this is that everything in this realm is made with circles. Like everything is circular. Tons of
circles everywhere.
Everything. And like the ground, the way the doors open and stuff, it actually makes the shape. It's called a mandorla. It's a gateway kind of shape. You see it a lot in ancient European art. And just circles everywhere. And so this is, and then they're called the fallen, right? These are relics of the fallen, right? So not only does a circle typically represent heaven in artwork, generally speaking, especially from a medieval time period, but that this thing fell and it's made of circles, right? It's all made of circles, right? So it's like, okay, this, and it used to blot out the stars, right? This was essentially like a heavenly race of beings, right, that fell to the earth. And that's kind of what this is all saying, I think. Really cool. And I think we're almost there. Yep, I'm at the part where time stops.
So, yeah, he kind of approaches it, and then you get this crazy sequence. Very abstract in presentation, very cool. But the concept is here that Clive is going to do battle against his shadow. When we refer to the shadow, it's actually called the shadow.
They make it obvious, yeah.
It's the Jungian shadow. So we should probably, for those who have not seen every other podcast we've ever done about where the concepts of Jung find their way into them somehow, what the Jungian shadow is. I'll let you take that away.
Sounds good. So there's a part of you that is part of you that you ignore, that you pretend is not a part of you.
Yes.
You pretend you're above it because your culture and your parents and your life experiences and your media, the stories people tell, and the thing you want to be does not relate to this secret part of you that you pretend isn't there. You pretend that, oh, I would never do anything illegal. I would never do. But there's this part of you that just really wants to break things, really wants to hurt people, really wants to, do all sorts of things. We'll put it that way. You can think of it, Freud would probably equate this more to the id.
Yep, the id.
And it's just your animal instinct that wants to just kind of do what it wants to do so that the selfish genes can propagate into the future.
You know, this is something that, like, I've noticed is so funny about, like, great comedians.
Yeah.
Is they often give a voice to this
the
id.
dark side of you, yes.
That people think, but like you're not allowed to say or you're not allowed to do, but we all relate to that.
You're right.
And when they get up there and they can say that and everyone can laugh, it's because we've all felt that before.
But we never want to say it.
That there's a certain level of social etiquette that exists that keeps us from doing that. But we've all felt the longing to do that thing.
Yes.
And that's what the id is. That's what the shadow is. That's what we're talking about.
Yep. And so if you really do some work and you close your eyes and meditate and you really search your soul, you will realize that there are forces at work in your body, in your mind specifically, that are really trying to push you to do things that you would consider uncouth.
Yes,
put it that way.
Sure.
And that's scary to realize that you have that in you. Yeah. That you could, if you were pushed hard enough, that you could kill somebody. Like, that's especially in modern society. Back in ancient days, they're like, yeah, of course I could kill somebody. Nowadays, it's like we wouldn't dream of killing anybody ever for anything, And then it's like, but that's in you. Your ancestors were animals, and probably some percentage of your ancestors were rapists, right?
Yeah.
And some percentage of them were not just murderers; they were like genocidal maniacs.
Yeah.
And that's your DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
it's in you.
It's not something that, anyways, I don't want to go too far into it, but let's just say that everybody has this part within them that's the dark part that they try to hide. And if you hide it and ignore it, it's going to show up in different ways. It's going to surface during the quiet times. It's gonna take over your deep thoughts, and you won't know what to do about it because you are treating it as something that does not exist.
Yeah.
However, if you're aware of it, if you accept that everybody has these dark fantasies, that everybody has these moments where something else seems to kind of take control of them, and they don't know what to name it. They don't know why they don't know why they did what they did. They don't know what could have driven them to act that way. Those secret drives are hidden within the shadow.
Yeah.
And it's very helpful for you to accept that that is a part of who you are, and to put it in its proper place, or to be aware of the things that drive you. This is what Jung said. If you fail to make the unconscious conscious, then you will be ruled by forces that you don't understand, and you will call it fate. Right? But if you're able to do what Jung, I think, or Jungians call shadow work, you can make explicit those things, and you can understand them, and you can recognize them as parts of you, kind of like Inside Out, that movie.
Yep.
Like you're like the anger part of you. You can treat it as a part of you that exists, and you can try to understand it, and then that way you can avoid it ever taking control of you because you know it's there. Right? There's that saying, what is it? I think it's in the Screw Tape Letters, right? That Satan wants to convince you that he doesn't exist, right?
Yes,
When you pretend your shadow doesn't exist, that's when it has the most control over you, right? That's kind of the idea there.
Yeah, I mean, this is the entire sort of driving principle behind like addiction recovery programs, and the idea is that, and we went over this a little bit in our Near Automata podcast as well, where we were talking about Pascal and sort of the fire and brimstone way of teaching fear and how this can actually do more damage. We didn't really go into how, but this is one way in which it does. The creation of taboos within ideologies. And then, but the problem is that each of us has the shadow inside of us that has desires for those taboos.
And there are things you should not do. So there are taboos.
Yes.
So, yeah.
But the problem is that we teach them as taboos, and so everyone keeps it secret and represses it instead of being open about what they're feeling and that being accepted, because that's the way you heal it, is by accepting that, yes, I am, the shadow is a part of me.
And Alcoholics Anonymous is very good at that.
Yes. So it's all about, first of all, admitting that you have a problem and accepting that it's a part of you.
Step,
right? The acceptance is the first step. You have to accept. And we've talked a lot about acceptance in other podcasts we've done. Senua, Sacrifice, Hellblade. But acceptance is key, even in Jacob's Ladder, which is yet to go public. But acceptance is really, really big. Because without that, and the more you try to repress it and hide it, and the more shame you feel about it, the more it actually ends up controlling. That's what addiction is. You feel so horrible about the fact that this shadow is a part of you. You keep trying to deny that. And then it comes back. Drives you harder and harder and harder into the behavior you don't want to do to feel better.
It's weird, but that's how it works. That is what happens.
So that's essentially what the concept is all about, is the way to get past, the way to defeat your shadow is not to kill it.
Or excise it from you. It is you. You don't want to kill it.
It's to accept that that's a part of who you are.
Accept it,
And to get rid of taboos and be open with people and be able to talk and realize everybody's struggling with the same thing, and we can help each other and lean on each other. In order to avoid these things that are harmful behaviors or harmful to ourselves or to others or whatever it might be. You need to lean on other people. You cannot fight that by yourself. And so that's what we're seeing happening here, is his acceptance that he was the one who killed Joshua. He didn't watch it happen from afar, and it was really the other dominant who did it. It was me. That's why I think it's part of his repression. That whole memory of him looking on from a distance, and that was the part he invented to try to repress the shadow and not accept what he did. And now he's finally willing to accept it. And so this whole battle against Ifrit is a representation happening in his mind.
I think so,
of and his way of slowly being able to start controlling this icon and it not controlling him.
You can't control it if you are putting yourself in a position of, I have no control over this.
I think that's what Ifrit represents in the story. Ifrit represents his shadow that was controlling him because he was trying to repress and deny that it is him.
And it comes up. You can't repress things forever. Like they bottle up. Like it's just the emotions and the passions of the human body cannot so easily be overcome by just thinking about it. Right? Like they will control you one way or the other. It's better that you're in the driver's seat and you guide them like a rider riding a horse or something than that you pretend that mind over matter and those things don't control me and that I don't have to, and then all of a sudden they show up. They emerge somehow and it's like a bomb. It's like a dry ice bomb. And then it just pops and then you explode and you don't know why you did that. But it's you have to come to terms with.
The way to control your shadow is to accept that it's there and become okay with that.
Yeah.
Not to fight it.
Yes.
and that's essentially what happens here with this battle. And so it's really cool. It's a really cool scene. And I think it's very applicable. And I think that's why maybe in these icon battles, the further you go in the game, you gain more and more control of Ifrit.
Oh, that's a good point.
And you lose.
Hey, I like that.
So
I like that.
Yeah, at the start, anytime Ifrit comes around, Clive has no control over what happens.
No, it's all
and
action time events. Is that what it is?
People have mentioned in the comments the yellow eyes versus a different color eye, which one represents control and one represents not losing control. Like Benedicta, her eyes went like yellow before she lost control of Garuda.
Because that didn't happen to her before. That's a good point, yeah.
So
I like that.
As Clive accepts his shadow, he's going to start gaining more and more control over Ifrit through the course of the game.
That's cool. I like that the gameplay, you know what, that makes me like these icon battles a lot more.
Yeah.
That the gameplay actually matches some story thematic elements. I think that's actually really cool.
So it's a really cool scene. I think there's some great spectacle, some great music. The fight itself is pretty good against Ifrit. And then, you defeat Ifrit first, and then it's like the shadow. It's like Clive. It's like Dark Link, but it's Dark Clive.
This is good. This is this is straight up The Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah.
When Luke goes into the cave in Dagobah system, and then he's fighting Darth Vader, and he's like, "Ooh, that's the guy I got to beat. It's another person. It's over there. Ooh, got to fight him. Ha! I killed you." And then it shows the face.
Yep.
It was it's his face, and it's like, oh my gosh. And that's an analogy because George Lucas was big on Carl Jung stuff, right? And Joseph Campbell and all that. So that was Luke struggling with his own shadow.
Yeah.
And that was his shadow presenting itself to him in a way that he now has to accept. That's him.
Yes.
That he is / could become Darth Vader.
Yes.
If he isn't careful with what his actions are. If you just go around fighting, and if you try to kill your father, you become the new Darth Vader. It's you. And what you're really doing is you're just going to end up killing yourself, right? That's really profound. I love that in Empire Strikes Back. But this is basically that exact thing. He's entering into the shadow. He's wrestling with himself, and he sees that the person he's wanted to kill this whole time takes off the hood, and it's him.
Yes.
Right? And that's straight up Empire Strikes Back. I love it. It's so good.
Yeah. And so you end up fighting the shadow form of himself. The shadow form of himself ends up, what do they call it? Semi-priming.
Yeah.
Right? Going into the halfway phase
at first.
Between.
Yeah.
And then so you have to defeat that one. That's where Clive learns to semi-prime.
That's right.
Then he's semi-primed fiking, and then he turns back. He goes all the way into.
Because he's struggling with it, but he's struggling with himself. And so when he conquers the semi-prime state, that's him conquering it. It's him subduing it and him able to use it in the future in the real, the real world.
I also really liked, he's like midway through the fight or somewhere in there, and he sees this happen. I think it's when the shadow shows up initially. He goes, "You're still denying it. The truth is staring you right in the face." And then the younger version of himself comes and puts his arm on his shoulder.
By the way.
And he's like, "No, don't worry about it. Like, I'm not going to keep running from it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm accepting it." And that's when he can semi-prime, and then when he starts gaining the abilities. Again,
it's
acceptance.
The different parts of himself are like coming to terms with each other.
Yeah.
His 15-year-old self, this weird shadow, dark, evil Ifrit self, and then his ego, current persona self, is like they're all kind of like in communion with each other at this moment.
Yes.
And that's like, I don't know, I loved it. That was so cool.
I had I'm not going to go as far as to say this game is Xenogears level. It's not. But I got Xenogears vibes from this scene.
Me too.
With the younger version of the self there, with the dark version of the self there. There was a little bit of the same stuff being explored with that, clearly.
And I love this because he's come to terms with his younger self, because the younger self is there next to him.
Yeah.
But he has not yet come to terms with that other part, So it's a process. He's slowly working it in, and he's slowly realizing that, this happened, I've got to let go of it.
Yeah.
And then, I love it.
And he's literally gaining control, gaining powers
as he subdues
from accepting the truth.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. And so then he ends up fully priming, and then Icon against
that
Icon.
fight was cooler. Yeah.
And ends up defeating his shadow self, comes back out, and
it even says that. It says, "You defeated Shadow Vanquished."
Yeah, Shadow Vanquished.
Shadow Vanquished. Yes. I'm like, oh, this is so good.
Yep.
So good. And then I have a few other notes before we leave. Before you go into the final phase, before you finally end up defeating Ifrit through the action time events. Not a huge fan of the action time events. However,
yes.
Well, I'm still not a fan of this one, actually. I thought this was hysterical. It says press L1 and R1 to accept.
I laughed at the same thing. I laughed out loud. I was like, okay.
I could not believe it.
Come on. Some subtlety here.
Accept the truth.
Accept the truth by pressing L3 and R3. Come on, man. Come on.
Oh my gosh.
Don't hit me on the nose with a freaking sledgehammer, please. Like,
I know.
Let's try for some level of subtlety here. The scene is good. That part was freaking laugh out loud, in my opinion.
The action time stuff, I don't know. I'm not the huge fan, but that one was especially like, oh, please give me a freaking break. Yeah, it's like they're hitting you on the hammer.
Yeah.
Sid's talking about hitting people with the hammer. This game is hitting me with the hammer, trying to and I'm like, dude, I get it. Okay. Maybe this is for the younger kids. I don't know, but
I guess so.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
So the one other insight that I have into this whole thing, just in general, is that I'm realized throughout all of this, and as he accepts what happened, and as it becomes more obvious, because for me, it was mostly just a guess at the beginning. I was 99% sure, but that Clive was Ifrit, but it wasn't this is where it's essentially completely confirmed. And I had some biblical readings about Joshua, right? Mm-hmm. And those seem to be holding up pretty well. I didn't know exactly what to do with Clive, though, because, well, if Joshua is essentially the Jesus character, then who's Clive? What's happening here? What's Clive doing?
Well, we'll get a lot more into that next episode.
I'm excited for it. Yeah. But at least to this point, I can throw another archetype into the mix here now. And that is, that's Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not just because he kills his brother, right? But first off, Cain was the older brother of Abel. So Cain was older. But the Lord favored Abel, not Cain.
Yes, right.
Which is the symbolic of the phoenix passing to Joshua, not Clive. Right. So it's wait, why?
Why didn't I get my inheritance?
Exactly.
Yeah, why'd you deny me my inheritance?
What's up, God? Shaking your fist. Dude, that's not cool. And then through the different turns of events, finding out that you are the one that killed your brother, right? So he killed his brother. He was older. The God favored his younger brother. There's a lot of similarities here with Cain and Abel. So I will say that Clive could, at the moment, be embodying something like Cain, but maybe a more redemptive, maybe a version of Cain that is capable of finding redemption later on instead of, the biblical version of Cain, which is, well, they don't really talk about him much afterwards.
He
goes off, has some kids, builds some cities, and then...
Yeah, full demonic. But, there's definitely a demonic element to being the dominant of Ifrit, right?
There is. Yes, there is.
For sure.
Of Ifrit especially, with the horns, it's like a demon. It's Satan. If Phoenix can be compared to, Jesus, then freaking Ifrit is
the opposite of that.
Totally the opposite.
And that's totally... that's the imagery from the logo of the game. It's the Phoenix and the Ifrit in battle.
Yeah.
And that's not just... Probably it's not just because they actually battled in the game. It's probably because there's something more to it that you're hitting on that this is building up to.
Yeah.
Joshua is pitted against Clive. That's why he's not just coming out and talking to him. He's trying to find a way to save him without killing him. But clearly he is against whatever fate or path that Clive is currently on right now. He's trying to stop him from wherever that's going. So I think that's also what's represented in the logo. But
very nice.
Anyway, I think we're going to stop there. It's a good place.
Okay. I loved that part, though. That was really good.
It was good.
Really good part.
It was good. I liked it a lot, too. Next time we'll play all the way up, maybe even a little further past the Drake's Breath. Not Drake's Breath, Drake's Head.
Mission.
Yeah. We'll probably go a little bit past that next time. So at least get that far. We'll see you guys next week. Peace out.